Hey guys, today we're talking about a new fantasy extraction RPG called Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery. Legacy is a third-person, full-loot PvPvE fantasy extraction RPG designed for high-stakes combat and strategic encounters. Chris Kaliki is the lead of Notorious, the studio that developed the game. This team consists of a good amount of Blizzard employees, as well as Chris, who has 13 years of experience working at Blizzard, and they used all of that experience to create Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery. They started doing alpha tests back in July of 2024, and during those tests, the game looked really good in gameplay and overall look, but it was definitely in alpha. It really needed some polish. Going into the early access, and with how long ago we saw some footage and saw other reviews, I'm worried they may be rushing the game, but I want to be hopeful because the game looks so good. Hopefully they aren't rushing it. With that out of the way, let's jump into what Legacy is, the characters, the gameplay loop, upgrading your character, and the roadmap that the company has outlined. The game takes place in a fantasy world called Mythregard, rich with expansive outdoor zones. Because the game is PvPvE, there is a balance between encounters with random mobs and other players. As you venture through the map, you will be able to take down random mobs along the way to loot them for better gear. During your journeys, you will come across elite and boss mobs that provide more of a challenge in addition to coming across other players. Take the battles you can and run away if you must, because all of your gear drops on death. To make things easier, you can load into a duo or trios queue as well, but if you're up for the challenge, load into that solo queue for that single player adrenaline pumping experience. Lobbies are currently said to be at 24 players, so loading in with a group could definitely make things easier. Although the game is not an MMO, it does incorporate a lot of those features with live service elements, consistent updates, daily challenges, routine content drops, as well as in-game features like a rich open world with dungeons and bosses, crafting, leveling up a character, quests, challenges, getting better gear, and even character customization. They also intend to add more features over time that might make it even more of an MMO, but we will talk about that at the end. You'll find loot on the ground, in boxes, or on the corpses of your dead enemies. You have limited inventory slots similar to Escape from Tarkov and other extraction games where you have to fit pieces of gear into the little grid system, so be careful about what you take and manage your inventory accordingly. As it currently stands, the game will be released with 2 maps. One of them is the main map, which is called Greenwood, and that is where most of the game will take place. And the second is called Goldbrook, and it is the tutorial map where you can play solo to learn the game in a sandbox environment without the threat of PvP. On these maps, you will come across 35 enemy creatures, including epic and special types with higher difficulties. There are over 800 items in the game to loot or to craft. Greenwood is the primary map, and it's where you'll spend most of your time. You'll be able to visit places inside of the map like the Dungeon Crypt and Goldbrook Farm. And on this map is where you will be experiencing all of the PvPvE, such as looting AI enemies, as well as taking down other players. As you play through the map, you'll notice that the world is destructible and can become part of combat. A warrior charging through a wall to then use part of that destructed wall as a weapon to throw against their enemies will probably become a normal sight to see. In addition to that, priests are able to levitate, so they'll be able to use this ability to avoid a lot of dangers as they slowly levitate through the air. We're told that each class will have unique ways to interact with the environment, so don't feel left out if you choose one of the other ones. In an interview, Chris stated that PvE was always something that they planned on doing, but through testing, they heard that there was a demand for more PvE, and that is when they introduced the tutorial map as well as the new onboarding system and quest lines that you can follow as you progress through the game. So it's good to hear that they are listening to player feedback and implementing systems for that. Greenwood has many hidden paths as well as different traversal mechanics that will help players avoid getting ganked, and this is one of the main systems that the team has implemented in order to try and offset that imbalance between experienced players and new players. We're told that progression is more of a horizontal path, and this will include you focusing on perks rather than your raw power to try and keep veteran players from stomping on those new players. The team has stated that their goal is to make gear matter about 60 to 70% compared to the player's skill, which will make up the other 40 to 30%. So as you play, you'll get better, but that doesn't mean that just because you've played a lot more doesn't mean that a newcomer could have a good level playing field against you. While you traverse the map, you will be able to climb up on things as well as vaulting over things. So be sure to use that as you are either running away from somebody or running towards somebody or just progressing through the map. Use the map to your benefit. When it comes to combat, there are 4 classic fantasy classes that will be available upon release. Each of these classes will have various different spells and abilities that you can unlock and customize. The first class is the warrior, and he's the big tanky melee bruiser that is going to rely on big weapons to do massive amounts of damage. The next one is the hunter, who will rely on their bow and arrow in order to deal range damage and being pretty agile. Next up is the rogue, and they will rely on stealth and subterfuge to be able to sneak around the map to do backstab damage and to catch their enemies off guard. And lastly is the priest, who is the levitation master who can heal and do various different utility-based things. Although it does seem like they will be able to hold their own, so don't feel like if you're not able to play in a group that you can't play the priest. When the developers set out to make the combat system, they wanted to create a Souls-like action combat with some MMORPG style spells and abilities. And honestly, I think they did a pretty good job of that. There are currently 11 unique weapon types with various different weapon abilities and traits. Combat is pretty quick and fast paced, and it will require you to use very precise timing with your attacks and your blocks and your dodges to be able to adapt to your enemies. Based on a lot of the footage I've seen, I'm a little bit torn on combat. It looks very rewarding, but more drawn out than a lot of other extraction games. AI combatants seem to have a little bit more health and do a lot more damage to you. But of course, that footage may be people who aren't very well geared out, but I can't say yet. It kind of reminds me more of the Dark and Darker feel, and I don't hate it. PvP combat is a little more drawn out, a little bit along the lines of Dark and Darker than a lot of other extraction games I've seen. And again, to be honest, I'm really liking that because it levels the playing field for people to be able to actually include some chance of skill instead of just being able to jump out and crit somebody and murder them in seconds. So it gives the combat a little more richness to it. So I'm all for the slower pacedness. As you play the game, you will progress your character and ultimately be able to level up to level 20 on each of the character classes, earning unique abilities and traits along the way. You'll be able to also improve your reputation with various different vendors that are in the game, and this will let you craft better gear and be able to buy better equipment from them. Currently, there are 7 vendors that will be released with the early access. In addition to those systems, there is a permanent lodging system that you will be able to upgrade as you play. As you play, you'll be able to upgrade the lodge to add better amenities, and these better amenities will be able to benefit you as you go out and adventure. Currently, there will be 6 different furnishings that you can add. The bed, which unlocks the rested experience that builds up while offline, similar to World of Warcraft and many other games out there. The cooking pot, which lets you cook meals that gives you buffs before you go out on your adventure. Kind of reminds me of Monster Hunter World. The storage chest, which lets you add new stash tabs to your stash and manage your inventory. The crafting bench, which lets you craft unique class tools like the war horn for the warrior and the poison dart for the rogue. And lastly, there is the ossuary, which lets you sacrifice trophies from fallen enemies to the blood god and gain a reputation buff. In addition to all the abilities you will unlock and the different furnishings you can do, you will also be able to upgrade your gear as you progress through the game. They have stated that the tiers range from junk to legendary, and these items are found through RNG or can be crafted at vendors by leveling them up or unlocking recipes. The developers have stated that legendary gear is not locked behind the higher levels, so new players will even be able to get these upon starting a character. Just be aware that you do lose everything upon death. So extracting with this legendary gear and building up an entire kit of legendary gear will take time, but you can start that as soon as you jump into the game. Again, going back to what we said a little while ago, the differential is currently set to where gear and abilities is at that 60 to 70% range. So don't feel like just because you're out of gear doesn't mean you can't beat some players that you come across. Developers have stated that they're trying to keep it around 50% for the skill to gear ratio. The developers have also stated that they plan on releasing seasonal campaigns. These seasonal campaigns will be a quest chain that you can follow, which will ultimately end in you taking out a boss. And for the first season, they've said that the boss encounter will be Morgthog the Cruel. So it's kind of cool to see that. And I look forward to seeing what other seasonal campaigns they have. Getting into the last part, we'll talk about their roadmap and their actual release with the early access. And so far, their roadmap will include 2 new classes, the Wizard and the Paladin. The Wizard will focus on elemental interactions, and the developer gave an example of using frost and fire to create fog, and they will have a unique resource system tied to collecting spells that are found across the world. Apparently, this system of looking for scrolls is going to be very important for the Wizard, and they will have the highest number of spells available out of all characters. The Paladin is much further out in development. They only really have it, according to their own notes, in paper design, but apparently they will have the ability to sense injustice in the world. It's kind of interesting to hear that. They'll be able to identify assassins and allow them to seek vengeance. In addition to that, they are saying that the Paladin will be able to buff other players, which is not something that any other character can do in the game yet. So that's kind of cool to see that. They're also planning a night version of Greenwood to come out in addition to other maps. They're planning out a Goblin Pawn Shop, which is a place where you'll be able to buy back any gear that you lost during your adventure. They'll also have a guild hall where you can build your community and unlock new progression features. And in addition to that, they're looking to have more cosmetic character customization features. Although this is mostly a PvP game, they are also looking to add more MMO features over the time, and that is to include more PvE experiences and deeper character customizations. I'm taking the PvE experiences to mean more boss encounters than anything else, but we'll see where they go with that. As it currently stands, there is the one map and you stay inside of that zone, but as they release more maps, they've also stated that the idea of being able to move between zones and visit other maps is a really interesting idea, and they'd like to implement it. But as it currently stands, any map that is released will be a single session map, which means when you launch into that map, you are there for the duration until you extract. Lastly, for their roadmap, they do state that consoles are eventually something they plan on doing, but as it currently stands, they're not sure about when. They're going to look to see how the early access goes on PC first and then work from there. Legacy Steel and Sorcery launches on February 12th on Steam. It is said to be $25 when it comes out. Of course, the price on the actual Steam page hasn't been updated yet. But in addition to that, they will have different supporter packages. For example, the Founders Supporter Pack or the God Tier Supporter Pack. And we'll see what kind of different benefits come with each of those. And that's all I have for Legacy Steel and Sorcery. Guys, the game looks really good. I'm really confident about it. I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to jump in there with you guys. I look forward to seeing all of you in Mythregard. I hope you guys have a great one.